Yeah. Oh,
That was a surprise. That caught me by surprise.
yeah. Oh,
That was a surprise. That caught me by surprise. Great. Thanks very much, Dave. Hello, everyone. This evening, when thank heaven we all seem to have power and internet, which could have been somewhat chancy if you looked at the wind power this morning. So I'm happy to be here with everybody, and I will do a quick roll call. John.
Here.
Okay. Joanne.
Here.
Carol.
Here.
Paul.
I am here too.
Jen.
Yep, here.
Barry.
Here.
And Ed is not here, I believe.
Not currently.
Okay, not so far. Just as, so we are here except for one member, we have a quorum and we can proceed. And Dave, I'm just going to ask you one reminder about counting or doing a head count at some point about how many people we wind up viewing the meeting, attending that virtually, okay? Because we
Actually, and Dave, I see Ed in the attendees. He's good.
Oh.
Good. Cool.
Okay. All right. If
We ought to
Kristen-
note that
Ed-
Ed is, we ought to note for the minutes that Ed is present.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We sure
Gotcha.
can.
Yeah, I had to log in via the public.
Yeah.
Apparently I didn't get my own invite, but that's okay. I'm here.
Hey, guy.
Welcome. I'm glad you're not out on a lobster boat today. That
Oh,
was-
isn't that the truth? Wasn't that incredible ocean? My gosh. Yep.
Okay, so let's proceed with the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the November. I have the wrong date on the agenda. I put November 17th, but it was the November 15th meeting. And we have a very nice draft that was sent around by Tricia Saunders. Does anybody see any further corrections or changes they want to make to the minutes? Hearing none, somebody want to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thanks, Paul.
Second.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, all in favor of, do we have to do this by roll call or? can we
Yeah,
just-
we do. We do it for Zoom. You need to. No,
All
you
right.
need to for Zoom.
Okay, all right, John, Jen,
I
Joanne,
missed the meeting, so I think I'm going to have to abstain.
Okay. okay. Carol,
Aye.
Paul,
Yes.
Barry,
Aye.
Ed,
I
and I vote aye also. So 7 ayes, 1 abstention. Minutes are approved. Okay, the next item on our agenda for tonight is the Communications Subcommittee report, and I'm here to announce that there will not be a subcommittee report from Communications. The two items mentioned the creation of a GRB web or BAC web page, GRB web page, and the issue we've been working on for a while of signage is still being worked on, but the lead people on both of those have asked for it to be deferred to the February meeting. So we'll take up communications at the February meeting because we certainly have enough else to deal with tonight. So with that said, I'm going to move on then to the Natural Resources Subcommittee report, which I will turn over to John and Paul because we have some very interesting information that you've either sent around or that needs to be addressed.
Sure. So we have a couple of updates, which we'll start with. One is we talked about at a recent meeting the concept of returning sand to the beach if it hits the roads. And the town was good enough to work on that after our meeting and informed us maybe 10 days ago or so, or maybe a week ago, that they had sorted that out with the DEP and given, as long as it's put down on the beach in 3 inches or less, they don't even need to get a permit by rule. So there's no fee involved in doing that. And the town has essentially agreed to go ahead and do that if we ever get a bad storm. That's never going to happen, right?
Sure.
How did we do today? Did we have much?
We'll find out. We got some pictures.
Oh, good. We'll look forward to with bated breath.
So that was number one. Number two was we also had talked about and at Natural Resources and then brought to the committee some thoughts about whether hay bales might be used in the pathways to try to mitigate the storm damage. And we talked in the subcommittee, I think a little less so at the meeting, about where they should be located, right by the road, and 10 or 20 yards in, out by the beach. Anyway, none of us are experts, so we were just sort of hypothesizing what might be the impact. The town also went and talked to the EPA about that. DEP, excuse me. And the DEP was interested in such an effort to see whether it could help. And maybe 10 days ago, some hay was put out there. What they did was they did not want a wall of rectangular bales put out sort of onto the beach to create a wall. Instead, they advocated, and this is what the town did, this is at Edgewood, putting them in an alternating sort of fashion, and they put those big round ones you might see in fields all around. So that was before the storm. And John, do you have after storm?
Yeah, we do. We have some things we can look at together. This was a picture that was taken as they were placing the bales. And I went out this morning, this is maybe 11 o'clock or so. So it's a solid hour after the peak of the tide. The winds were still blowing, the rain was still falling. But you can, this structure, you see the structure here. You see the relative height of the crossbar from the sand. And you see it here. This would probably, can you see my cursor? Is that moving?
Yep, it's good, John.
So that's probably about it. So you can see that there was lost a foot, maybe 18 inches of sand, which, is really not catastrophic. You're always going to lose sand in this kind of a storm. When you have big storms, the sand is pulled out, and then over time, the sand is returned. So this is normal cycle. What we were trying to do here was to see if these bales would lessen the energy, the force of the waves that were coming in to the cut, into the pathway, and lessen the erosion. And to be honest with you, I don't have an opinion on whether it lessened it or not, to be honest with you, because it was so wet, it was so rainy, and I really haven't had a chance to look at it carefully. And that's a determination we have to make later. What we do know is that the bales, interestingly to me, the 4 bales that formed the wall facing the sea, they're placing this 4th one here, are the ones that remained intact. It was the 3 bales behind that actually got eroded away and uprooted. So that's just very curious to me. I would have thought it would be absolutely the way around. So that's kind of fun. We kind of figure out what the dynamic was that created that. You can see this bale here is this guy right here.
Yeah.
And you see again that same 18 inches of sand that was moved. But these bales, these are the 3 that are in the back, they're totally gone. This one guy is standing up. He was totally rooted and pushed forward to butt against this guy. And the guy who was right here, he is sitting, lying on his side, and the other one you can't see is also on its side. So it's fascinating stuff. Some great hydrodynamics that occurred here.
John, at Camp Ellis, they had, and this may be exactly what happened to the rear bales, that the force of they have a problem because of the islands, like we have the Goose Rocks, they have a similar kind of situation, and it funnels the water into the beach in a particular area. And the force of the water intensifies as it goes through that area, causing the erosion. And it could be that the front ones did their job and funneled the water very strongly right into those back ones, and they just couldn't stand it. They wouldn't stay up. It
That's
intensified
interesting.
it.
It would deflect it and concentrate the energy aimed right at them. That's a cool thought, Paul. That would be here. You see it right here. See what Paul is saying is that these are the front ones. Now you're looking out to sea, obviously. 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are the openings in between. That then the water hit these guys, having been deflected around the front 4.
Oh, okay.
That makes a lot of sense, Paul. Well worth looking at. The velocity would have been higher between these. Kind of fun. So, basically it did its job. Hopefully. Who knows? I know, again, we need to really assess how much, and this is the key that Paul's going to bring up in a minute. We need a digital elevation model of these dunes. We need to I would propose we need to fly a LiDAR in a drone, get a digital elevation of the dune so that when we have a storm, we know what it was, we see what it is, and we know what happened to the dune. Right now, it's us looking at it and saying, well, I think the dune was out here, but so that's coming up. I'm stealing your thunder, Paul. You can see, though, what I saw just briefly there was a lot of exposed root in these. These are grasses that the sand has been washed away from the roots. God willing, they don't die. And if they can survive, then these will be wonderful natural collectors of sand. And Paul will be talking about that in a minute, how we can put artificial. But so hopefully the dune will come back. One other picture is this great. This is the infamous derelict boat that had been left out on the beach. It's now clearly trash, and hopefully we can convince the town that they're not going to upset anybody by removing this piece of trash, which has washed up and is blocking the entrance at the street. Does anyone know? This is Stewart's Rock, Stewart Barwise. Was this buried at one time? Does anybody remember? It may not have been, and it would just settle down if it was eroded anyway. But I was just kind of curious if anyone.
No, I think that's what it looked like when it was put there.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean no sand has been removed. It would obviously settle down as the sand has been moved under it anyway. So good stuff. That's what we've got. Any questions?
I think it held up well, considering that it was today's wind was southeast, which is the rarest of all the winds that we get and the most powerful.
Right. It was right up the gut. Right up the gut.
Yeah, and well, it blows right out of the guts of the ocean, whereas most of our wind from big, we talk about nor'easters, and normally that's where the wind comes from. When we talk about wind, just for anybody who's not familiar, because I get this question a lot, we're talking about the direction it's blowing from, not the direction it's blowing to. So southeast, if you stand there looking at those hay bales from Kings Highway, it's blowing right straight out of the guts of the ocean.
Right.
And my dad always said southeast, short and sweet, doesn't last very long, but it'll do a hell of a lot of damage.
Interesting. You bet. You bet. And boy, along the coast, we drove on Ocean Avenue and down Cleves Cove and those areas. The waves were just coming. It was just coming straight in. Hit Kennybrook Beach hard. But it looked like
there was a lot of blowover. Down at Cape Porpoise Pier, there's seaweed right up against the bait shed. I've never seen that before.
Yep.
In front of Mike Weston's house, it blew right over the head of the cove.
Right over the cove. Yep.
Yeah, he sent us a nice video of it blowing around. But anyways, no, good work going down and taking pictures today.
John, quick question, and this is probably way too early a question for anybody to answer, but the bales that have been moved all around, what's the game plan for that? Bring the equipment back in and rebury them where they hopefully, because we got a lot of winter to go.
Question for the town, and we'll just have to see what they want to do. Okay. They may work. It might be good to talk to DEP. DEP was very interested in seeing what happened. So we can share that with them and get their advice.
Great.
And it's a wonderful partnership we're developing because gosh knows, as the years go by, we're going to need their support in bolstering our protection at the East End and the West End.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think this looks great. Great work on this.
Can we use the seaweed that's been brought up? I mean, that's the old-fashioned way of how we used to protect the ocean.
And
seaweed.
yeah, and actually, Steve Hanna sent some pictures and what he observed at different points during the storm on the rocks themselves, the big rocks back by the road. He observed early that, but then once all the seaweed got up there and jammed it, it stopped a lot of the flow into the street. The seaweed was a natural barrier.
Yep.
Because the rocks were there to help us.
Yeah, the rocks were critical. There'd be a lot of sand in the lawns right now if it weren't for those rocks.
Yeah, we found that out in 2018 when I think that was the year that the rocks were not put in place, partially thanks to the BAC.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So next we have a little report from John on continuing efforts and discussions on water quality.
Yep. So it's good news and bad news. The bad news is that for the first time, the EPA has decided to group coastal areas along with lakes, ponds, and streams in terms of determining what is an impaired water body based on the concentration of enterococci, which is the fecal indicator bacteria that if it's high can be, not definitely is, but can be a proxy for pathogens that can harm human health. And most of those are human pathogens. Because of interspecies barriers, it is really the bacteria that grow in human intestines that are far more dangerous to humans than those that grow in deer and other types of animals and mammals. So that being the case, our Maine Healthy Beaches program looked at all of the data from the beaches, and the measure of impairment, the measure of saying that this is the highest level of potential contamination, is that the measurements needed to be above the safety threshold, which is this 104 we talk about a lot, for 10% of the season that beach is occupied or is available for recreation. So Goose Rocks is about 90 days, give or take a few, Memorial to Labor Day. And what that says is, if we have posted a warning that the enterococci is above that 104 threshold, and those are the warnings that we post when we say, do not swim, do not wade until we retest. If it's above that for more than 9 days out of those 90, 10%, then the beach is interpreted to be impaired. This has occurred at the mouth of the Little River. It has occurred at the mouth of the Batson River. It is not the case for the main beach, which there are 3 sampling points along the main beach. So we're really talking the area that is on the river side of the large sandbars that extend on each side of the Batson and the Little River. It's actually a good thing that Goose Rocks was divided into 3 beaches. That part I didn't mention, and maybe I should throw that up. Why don't I bring this up? Because it's important to the conversation. if you look at our beach, we have these extensive marsh systems, and here they show nicely in this tan, magenta, whatever color you want to call it, the non-green. These are our two tidal salt marshes. The one to the south west is draining Smith Creek, which comes down through here. It joins the Batson, and the Little Batson comes up this side. And our sample site sits right about here where we're taking the samples. And the beach area is considered this large sandbar area right through here. On the Little River, it's not quite as extensive, but it has Beaver Pond, which is an area that comes in through here. Beaver Pond drains down, and then you have the Little River drainage. Anything to the east of Little River is Biddeford. So this is all the town of Biddeford. Kennebunkport sits on the west. So these drainages then, and the sample point for the Little River, which is shown as impaired, sits here, and this is the beach area that would be affected by the Little River. The main beach, which is this area, these two principal arcs, are not considered impaired. They have not shown exceedances for more than 10% of the time. So that's basically where we are. I said there's some good news. The good news is that impaired status allows us to apply for funding from the state. And there's a group of us that are working with the town to be able to get the kind of funding that would allow us to do some studies up in these marsh areas. This is the current sampling that is being done by our Maine Healthy Beaches program. What you see in cyan are the 5 sites that monitor the beach. Here's the site I mentioned at the mouth of Batson River. Here's the site at Little River. And these are the 3 locations that monitor the 2 main arcs of the beach. Again, this is impaired, this is impaired, these are not impaired. So clearly the supposition and the suggestion is, and I believe it's absolutely so, is that these high concentrations of bacteria are coming out of the marsh. They're coming out of these large marsh areas, and there's lots of research that demonstrates that these types of bacteria, the FIB, fecal indicator bacteria, that are being, again, used as a surrogate for human, grow in the marshes. They naturally grow in the marshes. So it's no surprise that we have high values at the mouth of the marshes. What we don't know is, do we also have high human contamination? Are there areas where the septic tanks are leaking? Septic tanks that might come through these areas, might come through the Prescott Woods areas. Are there sources of human fecal matter that then would indeed be a concern for health? So what we are doing is proposing work, and we're hoping to get some extra funding to help us, that we can test to see not just that there are enterococci, but are there bacteria associated with human? And if there are not, then it becomes much less worrisome that we have high bacteria lots. In fact, it's to be expected that we have high bacteria. It's not the bacteria that's directly responsible for human health, at least not at these concentrations. And if we don't find human, we have a much better sense that we are not truly a dangerous place to swim, which I think we all know that we're not. I don't know how many of us have gotten horribly ill. I've been swimming here for 71 years and I haven't gotten horribly ill. So that's kind of where we are. That was long-winded. Are there any questions on that?
I would just add that thanks to John Crowder, who has been working on this as well.
And Steve Hanna, who's had a lot to do with this.
but John has found a scientist at Bigelow Labs who has an alternative approach to a PCR test, which we all know what that means by now, to test for a particular bacteria. And the problem, the big challenge in the past has been under there's limited labs available, and we've waited 4 months, 6 months to get lab results. We don't know real time. We can't adjust what we're testing. So there's a little bit of optimism that we might be able to do something different for this summer, to have a testing program in real time that's sort of separate and apart from the limited testing with Maine Healthy Beaches, which would tell us in a bunch of these sites what our frequency and concentration of human bacteria is. So that's, I think, the most positive thing I've heard in a long time, in terms of changing what we're doing to be able to really know what the problem is or what it isn't. It would be great to know that we don't have a problem, and it would also be helpful to know if we did have a problem.
Yeah,
right now we're in,
sorry.
Go back.
This is really, really great. Thanks to both of you for explaining it. I just feel much better understanding, even though we don't have all the results. I guess I have just one question. If we do the testing, and if the testing does, in fact, relate to animal contamination and not human, would we still be viewed by the state as impaired?
I'm afraid we would, given the definition of impaired. And that's just what's so. So it's going to be an uphill fight. Although from what I've heard, there are some other communities and concerns that are working with the EPA to say let's get real about a marsh environment. Marsh environments create the enterococci. If we're using that as the sole indicator, we're just not being fair to those kinds of beaches. And I think that's going to be heard. It might take some time, but we will know. And I think we will be fully confident to be able to tell any visitors and people coming that this is a natural, it's been this way for probably 1,000+ years if there isn't a human component. And canine is something else you probably need to look for as well, because that certainly could be washed down. And that's why we do see real spikes in the concentration of bacteria when there are very heavy rains. This is most probably the stormwater coming off of streets and sidewalks and lawns for people that don't pick up their dog waste and washing into the system. And it flushes out very quickly, but we definitely get a spike with high rains. So this is kind of fun stuff. We got a lot of data. We know a lot about it, and we're posting signs. We're keeping people aware. I think we're really doing the job we need to do.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
And I'm thinking that, I mean, I know we've all gotten this information, but, that the EPA, as we understand, the EPA report will be coming out in the next week or so, sometime in the second half of January. And I understand the selectmen will be looking at this issue. I think they have Megan Sims from Maine Healthy Beaches meeting with them at their meeting at the end, the 27th. And I think it's important because I think a large part of this, most people, I'm sure there may very well be the press or other media picking up this report. It's not only the two ends of Goose Rocks, but it's one of the beaches in Ogunquit. All very popular beach areas.
And all drained by a marsh. They also have a
drained by a marsh. I didn't realize the Ogunquit one. So that's, but when what isn't necessary, that's not necessarily going to be highlighted. And what's going to be highlighted probably is impaired beaches and, 3 very popular beaches. So I think the more we can educate, like listening to John's explanation, and be prepared ourselves. And perhaps if we get our web page going, that's maybe one of the first pieces of information we put out there to explain it to people and and help them understand that they're not putting their children necessarily into polluted waters, because we don't certainly want to be seen as that, and we are not necessarily that. And the ability to continue doing testing that we've already been starting, right? We've been looking.
We've been testing since
In the
2004.
limitations we have, yeah, within the limitations we have, both financially or otherwise. So as you point out, this gives us hopefully the opportunity to get more resources to do the further testing, to learn more about this, and hopefully understand that this is not what seems like a totally scary situation.
Exactly.
Great. Did we finish, by the way, with anybody having any questions on, Paul, that beautiful report you wrote on the dune management?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
next.
Otherwise I would have.
That's next. We
Okay.
were going with, yeah. And
I'm-
the other thing, the DEP just published, I'll send it around to members. I just saw it the other day for the first time. A very helpful, and I think we should post it on our website too, a very helpful guide for communities dealing with issues like this, on possible sources, possible solutions, checklist of directions, and to go down to once you've determined, like, if you have a human component,
Right.
where do you go from there? So it's nice that it's coming right now, as opposed to every town having to be on their own saying, well, duh, what do we do next?
Yeah.
And again, this is only if we find the human
Yes.
component, which all
Yeah.
indications that we've seen in the past for the Tesla. Last year, there weren't a large numbers. I hesitate to
we
say
haven't.
this, but there was 0 human. So, the signs are good. We just need to do a thorough study to be sure that that's indeed the case.
Okay, let me just procedurally, why don't we just, because we haven't asked for any questions or comments from whoever our attendees are. Let's just proceed. I'd like to go through maybe the rest of the other component you're going to talk about, Paul, of your
Yep.
great report, and then open it up for questions from the public, or anybody who's watching this, okay?
Okay, so I didn't get this in time for the agenda, so I will, once I clean up some typos, I will ask Kate to get it posted on the beach committee's page, so people will know what we're talking about. But what we essentially wanted to do, we've been working with dune restoration, dune preservation for a number of years, and what I wanted to do was to put together a little report to show what we've done. John, you want to pull up the second page?
I've separated out the pictures. You just tell me which picture you want.
Oh no, I was going with, okay. So things that we've done in the past, I'm just going to run through.
Oh,
this
you want the
quickly.
page? Okay.
But that's okay. I'll just run through the items.
All right, thank you.
You can show a picture if you can find one.
Thank you.
We did twine and stake in a serious matter after the 2018 storms. We revegetated. I don't think you have a picture of that, John. Yeah, that's what we did.
Stakes.
That's this summer. That's fine. That's what we've done for 5 summers.
Yep.
Along the vegetation edge. You can see here, interestingly, we put this, the vegetation was all to the right when we put these in, and then the vegetation jumped our line toward the sea as the summer went on, which is good and healthy. So we revegetated. We didn't do Edgewood. We did the next one, Proctor, and we did at Jeffries in a big way when they were washed out after a storm. We've been doing this annual placement of stake and twine. We've worked with the town to make sure the boulders got out there each year. We added boat racks on the trust properties to guide people and their boats away from the grasses to preserve the dunes. And then this year, the 2 things that we've just talked about was the hay bales and the concept of getting the sand back onto the beach after it washes up. These are wintertime activities. By the way, the hay has to be removed by April 1st, John?
I believe that's the date.
Yeah, per the DEP. So where do we go from here? Obviously, some of those activities are annual activities. They will change from year to year depending upon our damage in the winter. But I have on page 2, if anyone has that nearby, what John just spoke about is we would like to begin to establish a database to know where the dunes are today. It would be nice to know where they were for the past 50 years, but we don't have that data. So there's no time like the present to start. So we would, we don't have any cost on this yet, but hopefully by the little later in the spring, our goal would be to use a drone and use the right technology to map the dunes from end to end, so that we would know what the elevations are, we would know the width, we would know the dimensions. And, you know, we stand there in the spring when we put out this twine and say, where does this go? Where was the, you know, where was the dune last year? Where was the grass last year? And sometimes you can tell, sometimes we have pictures. So we're trying to do this in a more scientific way. We would like to do revegetation when necessary in the pathways to trap sand. Thank you, John. Next page, John. Down to the options. An interesting idea that we've seen is number C, which we do have a picture of, John. Passive staking.
Can't do both. All right.
I know.
There we go.
Sorry.
That's why I separated them out. Here you go.
Yeah. So that's passive staking. So instead of just, this has been done here, it's been done in Puerto Rico after bad storms. So instead of just putting in, people have been trying all kinds of things for, 50 years, 100 years. This idea seems to have a lot of promise. It's very easy to do. So instead of just putting the twine out on the left side of this picture, where, and towards us where you want the path to be, you actually supplement the area with wooden stakes, short wooden stakes. And they, the DEP, the Maine Geologic, is very optimistic about what they've seen this able to do in terms of rebuilding. So this would, for example, with a site we were just looking at, here you can see big carve out of sand with the roots, just like John showed us in our real life pictures. So this might be something we would try in the spring at Edgewood, at Proctor, at places that, saw serious damage in effort to rebuild them sooner. What else do we have here? There's a picture, John, it's called, if you have, I don't think we've ever done this here, but it's been done in Saco. The picture of, I think, go down one or two more, John.
Scraping?
Below, yeah, scraping. So this is an area where they had serious damage at in Saco near Camp Ellis. So they essentially they don't do any dredging or anything. They just bring back. They also do that, but this is a relatively cheap and easy method of pushing sand back up into the front of where you have a big carve out of beach, and then you put in grass or you put in the passive stakes to rebuild the dunes. So we haven't ever tried this. We probably have never really needed it, but with the water rising,
we may get there soon,
and storms getting more intense, it could be this is something we have to do in the future. One thing we tried, John, go down to the picture of, this is something that now we have good guidance on. This is on the Maine Geologic website, that when you restore an area after a storm, instead of just doing the straight line like the house on the left there, you do a directional angled zigzag, depending upon how much space you have, of course. We don't have a ton of space. I've seen it where they do it, where there's 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet of dunes, like down in New Jersey, and they have these zigzags going back and forth. Here, this would be a question for Ed. Today's storm would have come straight from that picture, from the south.
Yeah.
But that's not our typical. That's where this past storm came. So the question would be, if we did this in the spring, where's the last zig out to the beach? Is it
Well, you do the zig this way normally for our environment, because most of it is going to come from the from more easterly. Yeah.
Right.
So that's something that this comes from a Maine Geologic Survey. They now have good documentation and good advice on this. So we would certainly want to follow their guidance in at our beach. The other item, one other item. This is a walkover, which many private homes have here at Goose Rocks, but there are no, there aren't any on the public pathways. But the idea here is, our pathways are so vulnerable, because the water just washes through. It just finds that spot and it just washes through. It widens the pathways. This solution is an attempt to buy a little more time. And you essentially get a DEP permit. You fill the dune in with sand that you'd probably scrape up from the beach. So you'd restore the dune to its height and elevation on the right and the left. And then you put some kind of a walkover over it. It could be permanent like this. It could be partially permanent and partially temporary. It could be, at Edgewood, at the site we just looked at, the town puts a nice walkway there for accessibility purposes, for wheelchairs and things. It could be that you have some steps by the road, let's say at Proctor, and then you have an elevated walkway across the top. That's very common. I've seen that, like wooded slats across the top. Nothing permanent, so that you can get rid of it in the wintertime. But it allows the dune to be restored underneath, and it's a more, it offers a more permanent solution than just letting that wedge go deeper and get wider.
Less vulnerable.
Less vulnerable, right. Yeah, so the ocean would essentially hit at the front, out 40 feet, 50 feet out at the front, and it would do its damage to everything equally, as opposed to doing a lot of damage to our pathways.
Right.
We would like to be able to, there are these new resources, and we want to try to help make them available to property owners who suffer some damage and, may not have, it's sometimes difficult to find this guidance. You have to know where to look for it. So we've talked even with the town to, put some information in the code office. We also John and I met with Eli Rubin, who's the new town planner, before we started working on this, because he is, one of his charges is sustainability and sea level rise. And so we wanted to make sure that our efforts are integrated into what the town does, in the short term and in the long term. And that's my report.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh, yes, thank you. Let's start with questions on any of the topics from members of the committee. Or comments? Other than great job.
Phenomenal amounts of wonderful work. That's
Yeah.
really excellent.
Absolutely
Really
agree. Thank you so much. It was really very enlightening.
I have learned,
You've learned a lot?
definitely.
No. I just sort of a strange question here. Do you gentlemen feel in going forward from this, does our beach have somewhat unique possible issues that may come out because of the patchwork quilt we have that came out of the litigation of what's, town beach or town access points or whatever versus, I know we've talked about, some of this would be aimed as an educational thing, resources available to property owners for restoring the dune grass in front of their houses. I guess I'm thinking
Well,
about where do we
yeah.
go from there sort of thing in that sense.
There are some implications, like even the private pathways, which sand washes back on. The town has, from time to time, placed the sand back into those pathways because it's common sense and it's the right thing to do. But if we were to want to do anything with private pathways, it's a different set of, technically the town would need to get permission from, if the town decided it was in the public interest to do something on those pathways, you technically would want to get, public, permission from all of the rights holder to do something. So it's much more complicated when it comes to doing something there. Even putting the sand back on the beach, the town is only going to do that on town land because of those issues. The town does really have title from end almost to end, except for the people in the beach agreement, those 65 properties. So if the town was going to put sand back on those properties at some point because it was necessary, it would probably really have to go get permission. You might do that in a blanket way.
I would hope.
To do it once and for all.
Yeah.
And I suspect most property owners would support that without any problem. If it was done, by the town with the advice of the beach committee, people would be very happy, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like a big education component too, to
Yes.
the beachfront property owners, whether they be BUA signatories or otherwise, try and understand why it's in their best interest, what we're trying to accomplish. I was curious, looking at the zigzag pattern, that almost looked to me more like something that would, I think of more the West End, where you have such long, deep, paths coming out from individual houses, that would be of great interest to owners there. Whereas the East End, the pathways out and the stretch of dune grass is much shorter.
Yes.
Or am I wrong on that? I remember, didn't we try doing something, I think at Proctor, where they angled?
We did do a zigzag. Yeah. Based upon what I had learned from Hurricane Sandy in the New Jersey and New York area, we attempted. There was no guidance from the state at that point, so we just did it. Unfortunately, it did not survive. The following winter was bad, and it was washed out.
Okay.
But we were going all the way out to the edge, which shows the limitations of not rebuilding the dune beneath the walkway, which we didn't do. We just, I do think that's the direction we're going to have to go in, to try to restore the dunes and have some kind of a walkway over.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So what would you envision as sort of next step?
On dunes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we want to come back to you with a cost to do some mapping work.
Oh, yeah.
To establish a baseline.
Okay.
And that may be, other than once we do an assessment in early spring, to decide what to do in the as part of beach cleanup and invasive cleanup, which we should probably at the next meeting pick a date for.
Yeah.
so it could be that in addition to the stakes that we have and the ropes that we have, we may want to put in those passive stake trapping devices to test them out and see what the impact of, that's a low impact, low cost. So I think,
I really support that. The state, both on the west and the east end, I think that could be very significant in building up the dunes.
Okay.
But longer term, I think what we would be coming back to the beach committee with an ask is to have a landscape guy design a walkover of some kind. And maybe we just try a soft one, the first, as a start. Fill the dunes, fill a dune at a location or two, and do those soft walkovers. We have accessibility issues, of course. We need to keep Edgewood,
Without steps, hopefully.
It would be ramps. You'd have ramps, and we can do it. We can do it. I hope it would be hard and not soft.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I think this is great, amazing. You're doing wonderful work, and I hear that we're probably still going to be heading into the stake and twining this spring.
Absolutely.
So possibly looking at some of that passive staking, and hopefully also looking into getting some funding or getting some costs, and then thereby after that funding for doing the really basics of the mapping.
Yeah, I would actually hope that we could do that before the spring.
Yeah.
So that's something I'd like to come back to you next month. And that's something that doesn't need to wait to spring. In fact, the sooner we do it, the better. Had we had it, we would know exactly what we lost for this storm.
Yeah.
So it really can't be done soon enough.
No, I didn't. I don't think I meant to say spring. I think I meant to say this year, as in
that's good.
The more immediate step. So, okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments from the committee on any of Paul's and John's presentations?
No.
Hearing any?
Good job.
Anyone in the audience?
The public.
Great work.
Was a hand up.
Oh dear.
Okay.
I don't see anybody. Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, wonderful job and wonderful reports from both of you. And there's just, I'm so glad you were doing this, really moving forward on resources and so many things that will be important to the future of this beach. And now to the more landside issues of future of this beach. I'd like to, Barry, you and your subcommittee have done some very interesting work looking into issues about traffic and safety. And would you like to take it away?
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Kate. And thanks to the members of the committee. Some of you sent me some comments, which I really appreciate. And Paul, you in particular gave me a little history and some of the backdrop to it, and that was really helpful. So much appreciated, and thank you. Just before I go through the actual slide presentation, I just wanted to emphasize a couple of points. The first being that above everything else, the purpose, everything we did was just around safety. It was not to create more spots or less spots or to increase access or to reduce access, but really just to make the area as safe as possible. We do have to recognize that the volume of traffic around the beach has changed with many more people in the area. We've got the increased usage of the campground. We've got Hidden Pond in the last number of years, Binnacle Hill, and potentially there's going to be some changes at Ocean Woods, just to name a few. We also have significant increase in the traffic from delivery trucks, the FedEx, the UPSs, et cetera. And when you're standing there on a quiet summer day, it's one after another. So with all that in mind, our Traffic and Safety Subcommittee, which was myself, with Art LeMay and Tom Adler, We solicited input from the community. We reviewed this with Police Chief Sanford and Town Manager Laurie Smith, and then I sent out a document to the Beach Advisory Committee. I believe it was back the week of Thanksgiving. So I've got some slides here that basically encapsulate the comments and suggestions. I think it's very important to remember that some of the ideas almost guaranteed, will not be favored by everyone. And I think, I did not get rid of them. Even if I didn't agree with them, I decided let's put them forward for discussion. And we have to recognize that we are going to need to compromise if it's going to be safer for everyone. We also have to recognize there's obstacles to changes, such as the legal obligations under the beach user agreement, as we just saw, the physical layout and the width of Kings Highway. Obviously, what we would love to do just can't be done in the space that we have. We obviously have individual owners' concerns. Nobody wants a parking lot across from their house. And of course, as with any change, there's always a resistance to change when people come down to it. But I do like to think that if we can put forward some solid ideas and things that can help, and perhaps start small and move up as we get certain things done, we can then move to perhaps be a little bit more aggressive. So really the goal now is just to solicit feedback from the community, discuss some of the ideas that we have here. I've synthesized and consolidated the information to hopefully make it a little bit easier to manage. And based on that, we, meaning our subcommittee, can revisit some of the recommendations that we would like to get implemented this summer. And I think it's fair to say that some of the ideas, and I think they'll be fairly obvious, are things we can get done for this summer. Others are ideas that, whether we agree or disagree, they probably need more study. They're probably what I would deem longer term. So I think from that point of view, we would put them on the table and then get a sense of what the community thinks about them, and then either push them towards a more of a longer term approach rather than for this summer. So what I'm going to try to do here is just share my screen. And let me see if I can do this. Famous last words. Let me know if you see it.
Got it? Looks good.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through this. Observations from the community, and this came from, literally 20, 30 people. That some of them stopped me when I was walking along the beach, and others along the street. Others sent emails, etc. I'm just going to mention these and then get to the actual options. Too much traffic congestion near the public beach and kiosks. People are concerned about their kids and about traffic. The speed of traffic on Kings Highway at the west end, as well as on Wildwood, Community House, and Dyke Roads, all pose a risk to drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists alike. Heavy volumes of pedestrians and cyclists on roads without designated lanes, sidewalks, or crosswalks. And there's a real concern that many people just do not follow common safety rules, walking on the proper side of the road, single file, cyclists racing down the west end of Kings Highway. There's concern about insufficient police enforcement, lack of towing for multiple instances of parking violations. And I will say, in fairness there, when we met with Chief Sanford, he's concerned that there's an issue of perception with respect to speed. When it's a small street and someone's going 22 miles an hour, it feels like they're going a whole lot faster than they are. So I'm just putting it down because it is a concern of people, but I do know there's two sides to every story. The 3 parking spots at the east end of the beach, east of New Bedford Road, across the street, increased danger for cyclists. People were concerned. They didn't like the fact that this parking, it's a weave as far as that goes, and someone was almost in an accident there and wanted me to make that point. If I continue, maintenance trucks, numerous construction vehicles park on the street, not in driveways, making for passage for cars, cyclists, pedestrians far more dangerous. Most of that tends to be landscaping, but several of the contractors are just as guilty. The 4 parking spots at the west end, when full, create additional speed for traffic as people race back to the east end to find a spot. It's almost, it's amusing to watch that, where people come along and as soon as they see that the 4 spots are full, they whip into, not to turn around, they whip into someone's driveway, most likely ours, and hightail it back to the other end to get a spot. Some of the GPS systems are routing visitors into the area via Beaver Pond Road, which is not designed for through traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And the parking spot on Kings Highway west of Bellwood restricts traffic flow. And Saturday morning activity, especially early morning with garbage trucks, joggers, and strollers, can be particularly high owing to rental turnover, as well as just weekend volume. I know we have guests that come just for the weekend. They go out for an early morning walk on Saturday morning. They're not there on Wednesday, but there is a lot more traffic that you see. And with the garbage trucks, it just creates, again, unnecessary, in my mind, traffic. So some of the options that we wanted to put on the table, and these fall under the things we can look at immediately: increased police enforcement on Dyke Road in the west end of Kings Highway to enforce a speed limit, increased use of speed monitors in different locations, perhaps buying one for GRB exclusively. I'll just add my personal 2 cents that when I'm coming up Dyke Road and that thing's telling me I'm going too fast, I inherently slow down. And I've seen quite a few people just watching do the same thing. I do believe they are effective, and moving them around and putting them in other areas may help. Increased use of towing for offenders parking illegally. I believe that has started, but people feel, they see the same cars there all the time. Why aren't they being, towed? I've also heard people say that they've approached people and someone said, hey, it's $25 for the day to park and the ticket's $52. I'll take the $52. So, when we get into those kind of situations where people just abuse the regulations, I think we have to be a little bit more aggressive. Landscaping trucks and construction vehicles must park on properties of homes they are working on, rather than just on the street blocking the 2-way traffic on the west end. And I would imagine it's the same thing on the other end of the beach. A couple other thoughts were move some of the parking spots from highly congested areas to newly created spots, if we can, between the pump station and Dyke Road. And if that area could somehow handle perhaps even some alternate parking, that could be very helpful and still maintain the fact that people are close to the beach, not move them way out, but it might make it a little bit, it's central right near the general store. Increasing the number of crosswalks at each beach entrance, repaint them in bright colors, beach themes to be more eye-catching, and someone suggested maybe an art contest to come up with some beach designs stenciled between the stripes, anything to draw people's attention to the fact that, hey, there's people crossing here, there's children, etc. For the west end of the beach, possibly putting in electronic sensors on the 4 spots to notify at the intersection of the general store that there is no parking at the end, and avoid 20, 30 cars going down looking for a spot that doesn't exist and never did exist. And that would get rid of some of that racing back and forth. Or another thought was save the 4 spots for local use and or clamming. And, again, people that do come for different purposes and they don't have the ability, they're coming for commercial and they don't have the space. This could be a very helpful thing. And as well on the West End, some of you may have noticed last year, some of our neighbors put up signs, the type of kid-friendly sign that you can buy on Amazon, and they tend to work as well. I think we discussed this at a prior meeting, and you don't want to have every single lawn have it because people become blasé. But if we could come up with some sort of alternating, having a couple of signs here and a couple of signs there and rotate them, might be effective. So going on, and I'll give everybody a chance to comment. I've only got another slide or two. Striping the west end of Kings Highway and Community House Road with edge stripes. The research tends to say that striping tends to slow down traffic. And I went down a couple of other streets that I had seen, and in other areas, it does appear to work. It just narrows the road for you and gives you a sense of, wait a minute here, I got to follow these lanes, and it tends to slow down traffic. Move the garbage and recycling pickup to a weekday when there's less people, there's less turnover, and there's less guests at the beach. And explore the use of dedicated pedestrian cyclist lanes, and continue to work with the town to explore this idea for the west end of Kings Highway, Dyke Road, where it began. But you still see, it's interesting because you've got an area for pedestrians and cyclists, and people still use the other side. So we've got an education here as well. Community House Road, and again, lots of foot traffic and kids on bikes, and possibly Wildwood. And then finally, the 2 points in terms of education, in terms of the immediate options, would be education, recognizing the traffic problem, helping to manage as a top priority. I'm glad that this is part of this agenda. It's a good start. I'm glad that the town, Lori is supportive, as is Chief Sanborn. So I think there's an opportunity here to take some concrete steps, but we've got to really get the word out to the community. And some of the concepts that people came back with were, we should have a day at the beginning of the summer, an education day, give out donuts at the general store, and this sort of thing. I didn't put it in here, but I'm just relaying what people think could work. And finally, I'm going to go to the last slide. These are 2 longer term concepts to explore, and I know they're probably certainly not going to suit everybody, and I understand that. And, I think it's a question of we should do some investigation and explore it. Turning Kings Highway east of General Store for July and August into one-way traffic. And, it becomes, you may be solving one problem and creating another, but without the proper research and study, it's hard to say, but that's something we certainly could undertake. The chief was certainly, he listened. It gets messy with signage and all sorts of things, and cyclists going one way or another, but you could create a cyclist lane as well if you only have one lane of traffic instead of the two-way traffic. And then finally, the concept of an off-site parking away from the beach area. And, ideally, it would be at Ocean Woods. Now, I know that can't happen, but ideally, if you could have an area where you were to say, okay, here's 30, 40, 50 spots, and remove that traffic from the beach area and that traffic flowing through, it could make life a lot easier. Now, finding the area and getting permission and getting a shuttle and getting that all orchestrated is not a simple thing. I recognize that. So thinking that it's something we should be talking about and investigating and discussing, but probably a longer term issue. So that is, I'm going to close this up.
Great.
I think, are we back?
We're back.
Okay, so in a nutshell, that's it. A lot of ideas in there. And as I say, I think, I'd really like to hear from our group, and I'd really like to hear from the community, people's thoughts and any other ideas as well. We'd be happy to take them.
Great. Barry, thank you. And beyond to Art and to Tom, this is great work. A lot of interesting things to think about, some shorter term options and some longer term options. So I'm gonna, before I add my comments, let's just open it up to the committee. Anybody have questions or comments, please ring in right now.
Well, I'd like,
Go ahead.
I can go last.
No, you can go first. Go ahead,
Okay.
Ed.
Well, Barry, thank you and your subcommittee very much for that. It was, informative. Some of the issues that you discuss are certainly unique to Goose Rocks, but many of them that I heard you talk about tonight are not at all. They're the same issues that we grapple with here in Cape Porpoise. I hear a lot from North Street, similar things about especially landscapers and parking and just traffic control in general. It might be wise, for us to create an ad hoc committee town-wide to discuss some of these problems. Because, and some of them we're just not going to solve. One of my favorite sayings is you can't fix stupid. And a lot of the problems that we have people who come here, and I'm not saying they're stupid, but they come here, they're on vacation, they're just looking around. Oh, look at the pretty house, look at the pretty ocean, look at the pretty trees. And they're not paying attention to what they're doing, and they don't know where they're going. And it makes me pull out what's left of my hair in the summertime. I'm glad I work on the ocean and not down in Dock Square, because it wouldn't end well. So I don't want anyone to think that the Board of Selectmen or the town, is dismissive of these ideas, but they're not unique to Goose Rocks Beach by any means.
That's a good point, Ed, that a number of the issues are really town-wide issues.
Especially, you have my full support on the landscaping. Our ordinance says no parking on streets.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it every single day, and it drives me crazy that we don't enforce our own ordinance. And if any of you want to go over to the town office and give them hell about it, be my guest, because I have, and it's gotten nowhere.
Well, what's the solution though for it with landscapers? Often there's no choice because the whole, all the driveway's full.
Mow your own lawn.
It doesn't work in rental.
If my wife
in rental situations, it doesn't work.
Well, but park there. Our rental, our ordinance says now that you have to have parking for your rental, and the landscapers. And I mean, I sympathize with them. I work for myself. I've been self-employed ever since I got my bachelor's degree and decided I didn't want to work for somebody else the rest of my life. They're hardworking people, and I'm not, coming down on them, but I see a lot of unsafe traffic situations here in Cape Porpoise. Very similar, narrow streets, a lot of trees down here. So, in the afternoon, the trees shade. I almost ran into a landscaping truck a couple of years ago, on Ward Road, because I didn't see it. And I'm sure it's the same in Goose Rocks. Yeah. And we simply need to enforce our ordinances. You can have all the subcommittees you want, but if we don't do what we're supposed to do, what the ordinance says, then I can't help you.
Yeah,
but I've heard the same thing from the North Street group too.
Well, I think one thing that might have to happen is that landscapers will have to drop off their equipment, have another individual in the truck that drives it away, drives it around until they pick them up. It's going to raise the cost. People are going to have to spend more, but I don't know how else you're going to be able to have a service and not park on the street. And I agree with Ed, it needs to stop, but there is a way you can do it. It's just going to cost more money to have an individual drive the truck away the trailer and the truck while the other individuals work.
Or
Yeah.
they park in their driveway. I mean, it's.
Well, a lot of times that's not an option, Ed. It just isn't an option. And so therefore they've got to be able to move the truck.
Mhm.
John, I will just say that when I was doing this, there was one week and my wife and I were just walking to the general store from the West End and back, and there were 5 landscapers there, and all 5 of them could have parked. I mean, some of those homes are large and certainly had enough driveway. Now, I'm going to say it's not every time.
Right.
There's going to be, some areas where they can't. And that does become problematic. But most of the time, there's an available driveway. They just, I don't want to use the word lazy. If no one's bothering them, they just park right in front.
Right, makes sense. Well, again, and then if they can't, they need to move the vehicle. That's
Yeah.
just that they're going to have to price that in.
And maybe I've noticed too, maybe I'm hallucinating on this, but it seems to me that the landscapers' equipment that they come with has gotten bigger and bigger. You have usually
Yes.
somebody with a
Time
full-size
is
pickup
money.
truck, and then you have some massive trailer
Price
or
goes up.
whatever. And when we first, the guy who's been doing our landscaping for, since we first built the house 20-something years ago, I think he used to come with just his truck with a lawnmower on the back of it. And then on it, and then now that's not the case even for him. And the good news is, I think that there's more and more business for the independent, the landscapers who are local businessmen. Certainly want to support them, but it really is causing a parking and traffic problem. And not just them, but we also have obviously a whole lot more construction and renovation work going on too. And again, contractors in that area too are bringing, have multiple people coming to work on a particular project. And, all their guys come in their respective trucks and cars and they're parking all over the place. It's a problem that I think that we need to deal with, because we do have more people here and they need to be protected in walking and whatever. Just watching the kids going back and forth on bikes to the community house. And personally, I would love to see somebody solve the problem about every GPS system telling people to come down Beaver Pond to access, that area of the beach. This is a private road. And
It's
that
the shortest route. It's an algorithm. It's an algorithm. It's the shortest route. I mean, you have to put up a sign in the front that says this is not public access to Goose Rocks Beach.
We have done so, and they pay no attention. It says
Well,
no.
yeah, I don't know what you're going to do. It's an
I don't know what we're
algorithm.
going to do either, except we get to pay
So
for
let's
the road.
let's go with these one at a time. I
Yeah.
think the truck issue is not an easy solution, but it's kind of easy for the beach committee. We could vote to ask the town to begin to enforce, as Ed suggests, service trucks are not other than in allowed parking spaces at Goose Rocks Beach. That's very simple. We can do that. We can do that tonight.
Mhm.
Not just
we do.
service trucks, Paul, but anybody. Just simply enforce the ordinances, because
Right.
we're all aware there's a set number of parking spaces at Goose Rocks Beach per ordinance, per the Goose Rocks Beach agreement. And nobody can park in places, whether they're a landscaper, contractor, or Board of Selectmen member who decides he wants to go to the beach and doesn't have a beach
Right.
sticker or something. Nobody is immune to
Mhm.
that.
And you can tie that right in with increase the towing of people who are not where they should be.
We can't do that. That's an ordinance issue. And I was in support of the towing, but it's not like you can just snap your fingers and tow a vehicle away. That's the real problem.
I was surprised at a
Maybe
couple of
we need a
years ago
booth.
when to find out that at that point, I think the police department did not even have any towing
Right.
authority. And then hasn't
that's
that
true.
been changed? So
It
they
has,
now
and that was within the last 2 or 3.
Yeah,
COVID's kind of
exactly.
destroyed how far back
Yeah,
things
right
are,
on.
Yeah, I know.
like everybody. But that was when we were meeting in person. I remember that.
Yeah, I do remember that. And
What about having escalating fines? Do I understand that the state sets that? That's not something we can change? Is that what I heard on that?
I don't know, but usually I find that the things that are really wrong in a town, are set by the state. You know,
Yeah.
things like that. And if it wasn't so far away, I'd run for the state house, but I don't want to drive 100 miles to Augusta.
Yeah, I think we can't, I wanted to have escalating fines. First one's $50, the second one's 100, the next one's 300.
I want to have property taxes that are based on what you paid for your property as opposed to all this revaluation.
You gotta move to California, Ed.
Yeah. Or
So
Florida.
let's think about Paul's motion. I mean, can that be an emotion? Let's carry that forward.
Any motion you want. You know, it's not binding in that sense, but absolutely you can bring that forward to the
Yeah,
town.
I think we should.
It's a good idea.
Paul, was that, yeah, who was the secretary? Did we collect that? Is that captured?
So the motion would be that we're asked that we are going to send a letter to the town manager asking for increased
Send it to the
Board of Selectmen. Okay.
Yes.
That
Then
we're
it can't get ignored.
We're going to do it as a recommendation. The
I'm not saying
BAC
ignored. I'm just
Right.
saying it.
And as a matter of fact, this is going to be a letter that may have some other things on it.
yes,
So
obviously.
this is one thing to put on. We ought to vote on each separately. So
Yes.
we're saying we're going to include this on our list of recommendations to the
Okay.
Board of Selectmen.
My suggestion to you is though, let's keep it simple and let's pick the ones that you really like here.
Absolutely.
Because I want to be able to support you.
I would second that one and ask to move it to a vote.
Okay. All right, so the motion then for now is that we include in a recommendation, which may be larger so far, later on, a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that the no parking rules in this town
Ordinance.
be enforced against
At
all
Goose Rocks. Goose
Rocks Beach area.
Yeah, I would say keep it to Goose Rocks because that is your area of
Yeah,
purview.
that's our
Exactly.
jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So,
The no parking rules in the town be enforced in Goose Rocks Beach, whether the offenders are contractors or
Period.
private
Be
individuals.
enforced.
Period.
Okay, be enforced, including by towing.
well,
No,
be enforced. They gotta
It's
decide.
simple. Oh, no,
Just
okay,
enforce it.
so.
Yeah.
We are saying that the first thing we're going to include in this, that we're gonna vote on right now, is that the no parking on the street rules in the town be enforced in Goose Rocks Beach.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. I mean, Goose Rocks has its own parking rules. So
We
it's,
do?
Yes. Yeah, we
Yeah,
only have
the-
168 parking
reserved
spaces.
spots.
That's parking
But
spaces.
that's the only thing that's different than the
Right.
rest of the town. I mean, you have
Right.
parking by permit and then you have no parking. And other
Right.
than the parking by permit, with the exception of one other place in town, you're the only one.
Okay,
Right.
At the parking lot, that's the town dock square,
No, Government Wharf, the fishermen over there are parking by permit.
far out.
so I'm back to that we are recommending to the Board of Selectmen that they take whatever steps are necessary to ensure that the no parking ordinances or rules in the town of Kennebunkport are enforced.
Goose Rock Beach, not Kennebunkport.
No, but
No, it's the rules of Kennebunkport. at
Oh, all
Goose
right, I
Rock.
see what you're saying.
You're
Yeah.
right. Go ahead.
Okay?
Yeah.
It
Second.
should be narrowed. It should say the town rules in Goose
Take
Rocks
forever on
Beach
this, guys.
as they apply to Goose Rocks Beach.
Enforced in Goose Rocks Beach, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Fine.
And since this is not binding,
Of
this
course.
is simply a letter to promote some discussion at the Board of Selectmen.
Exactly,
That's my
exactly.
idea behind
We're
this.
spending way too much time on this. but it's good.
Exactly.
This is a recommendation. This is one of maybe other recommendations we're going to make tonight, and we will put them all together. But this is the first one, and we want to vote on this.
Call
Okay.
vote.
Okay, John,
Aye.
Joanne,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Paul,
Yes,
Jen?
yes. She was a yes.
Sorry, yes.
Okay. Carol?
Yes,
Okay, so that is unanimous. Oh, excuse me, I vote yes also. That's unanimous. Okay. I have one other thing that I don't know that I personally love the idea. I'm looking at this as what are a couple of things that we definitely could hope that they recommend to the town that we really work on for this summer and that are, I think, relatively low key. One to me is the crosswalks.
Yeah.
I counted there are 11 crosswalks between the Dyke Road, Kings Highway intersection to the other end to the New Bedford Road intersection. 11 crosswalks along the east end. Carol informed me there really are none on the west end, correct?
yes.
Yes,
Well,
so
what do you mean by that? There are heavily
Stripes.
trafficked corners.
that's different. I'm talking about what we've got in place. We've got
Okay.
crosswalks. We've got crosswalks that right now, when I drove it, are, they're so faded by now, but we know that the town, I've talked it over with Lori, that the town will, of course, be repainting those in advance of the height of the summer season. Now, I also know that downtown on the Temple Street crosswalk this past year, the town did try some fun and interesting things there, doing different themed crosswalks, repainting them temporarily. I would like to propose that we, for this summer, it's a relatively low budget and, easy thing to do, brightening up those crosswalks and making them more visible, making them even more fun for people to notice as a driver instead of just the usual white crosswalks. Let's talk about either having them painted in bright colors, or at the very least, we could have them do a stencil in the middle of some sort of beach theme, a sailboat, a starfish, whatever. Again, I'd have to talk further with probably DPW or whoever's doing this in town to find out exactly what the materials are and how much more. But we thought Audrey Lakin came up with a great idea. We could go to the high school and ask if any of their art classes want to work on this project of creating the beach theme, whatever, that might be added into the crosswalks. And we could also, that would perhaps give the kids who are working on that community service that they need, the kids that, like, for example, to come and help out with the dune staking and stuff like that. Just throwing it out there that I think it's something, it would basically be something that we could do easily this summer. So.
Do you want to increase the number of crosswalks, or are there
No,
sufficient?
I'm not talking about that, because as Carol or somebody pointed out, there may be places on the west end that at some point, you want to add a crosswalk on a heavily trafficked area, whatever. But for this summer, I'm just saying, let's deal with the crosswalks we have. It's a different issue to say, because then you get into, some people don't want a crosswalk near their house, or some people think it should be here. So I'm talking about the ones we actually have that the town is going to come back and repaint in their exact spot. Why not try and make it more visible, more fun to look at, as they tried to do it. They did a rainbow theme at one point on Temple Street, and another point they did a patriotic theme.
Right, I know, but if you've got people speeding down the West End Street, why wouldn't you want crosswalks in front of the main beach access points? I don't understand that.
I'm not saying we shouldn't.
That's another thing, John.
That's
Right now,
another issue.
The existing crosswalks, we'd like to add to the recommendation that the town brighten, refresh, and make more obvious the existing crosswalks, 11 of them on the beach.
Doesn't sound like a huge ask.
Nope, but we do have to ask, so.
Yeah, Paul, thanks.
Yeah, I find people really very respectful about crosswalks where they are. People are not going that fast where those crosswalks are. And I don't find there's a problem. I didn't think the big bright colors, people were concerned about all the signage and all the clutter and everything. I didn't find them, terribly welcoming. I didn't think they were necessary. If they're well painted, I know last year there was a paint shortage and a lot of stuff didn't get painted. But I don't find those existing crosswalks to be really problematic. I think the problem is where they don't exist. And
Exactly. That's my
while
point.
people are speeding and don't, are in their own world, so they don't see the,
Exactly.
yeah, and the speeds are higher at the West End than, you can't go more than about 7 miles an hour in front of the Tides Inn with all the congestion. You just can't do it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you that we have to come up with, I totally agree, repainting them, making sure that's very visible, absolutely.
We're going to do
If we
that.
can make it a little bit of fun, I don't have a problem. But I think the real question here is what do we do to slow the traffic on the West End? Whether it's speed bump, whether it's crosswalk, whether it's striping, I think that becomes a fundamental, that could improve things, or avoiding those 4 spots, but that might get more political. So if we want the quick answer, I think we just have to address the immediate needs as, crosswalk, striping, speed bumps. What do we want on the West End?
I would propose we ask them to place crosswalks at the beach entrances in the West End and repaint, obviously, the ones on the East End.
Yeah, I think at the West End, it's kind of tricky, and I think you'd have to go one by one and make a plan and see whether, because of where those paths, they hit private property, they sort of hit corners, sometimes they don't. It's not so simple because there aren't streets.
Some of the entrances are for 1 family and others are for 8 families. So, I mean, you'd have to really go through it. And I'm happy to do that and make a recommendation. But you can't just say every crosswalk, crosswalk at every crossing. I mean, it would look like a zebra.
Well, not everyone, but there aren't that many that, but yeah, there are some that are for the back lot people to be able to access the beach, correct?
Right. And
those should have stripes.
That's too much, John. Like that's where every single house would have it. And you lose the benefit. No one's going to slow down. I think a couple of strategically placed where there's heavier traffic could make sense.
Heavy traffic combined with speed would be the right place to do it. Hey, Barry, I know when we did the parking analysis years and years ago and tried to move some parking spaces, we actually went out and measured the road widths at various places to figure out, was our perception the reality about, oh, it's really narrow here or it's not really narrow here. And I'm wondering, I think a bike path, I would be more in favor of a bike path all the way down the West End to narrow that road a bit. But I don't know how that road measures up to, we did one on New Biddeford Road, very simple, town approved it, didn't require state approval. We did that striping, no big deal. It's not an official width. It's not an official bike path. It's not an official sidewalk, but the town was comfortable given the width of the road, even with that parking all along New Biddeford Road, that we could do it. And, it narrowed the road. It slowed the traffic. So I'm just wondering but I don't know that width there versus the West End. I don't know if the West End is constant, the same width, the whole distance. Does it narrow and widen? I just have never thought about it.
It's pretty, my sense would be, it would be pretty much the same all the way down. I mean, Carol, your sense?
It varies.
It does,
The width of the street isn't the same all the way down. I think 3 of us have said what we found the most effective were the electric signs that slow down. I slow down every time I see a sign. I personally do. The crosswalks are tricky, and it's a legal issue, and I don't know it, but it's not that easy. As Paul said, it's just not that easy. I'm more inclined to just say, I like the electric sign. It isn't there all the time. People understand we have a sign there for the summer. When our family comes to visit, I tell them that the West End is a walking path that cars are allowed to drive on. And they need to consider it that way, because people love to walk on the street. They love to walk 4 across. They like to walk with their friends. They like to walk with their dogs. And that's the way it's been for
With their beach equipment.
yes, for 70 years. And I think I like the kids learn to ride their bikes there. I mean, I like it. And I think the cars need to slow down. And I understand those electric signs are expensive, and they're not pretty, but we do have a pump station right there. And I personally pay attention to them. They've caught me going a little bit faster. And because you can change, my understanding is that you can change the wording on it, which I found to be effective. Kids playing in the street one day, dogs walking in the street, 15 miles an hour. Anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah. I mean, my suggestion on the crosswalk and the painting, the bright colors in the painting is, again, to number one, I was looking at a couple of things that we could very easily send forward that the town could do, I think, pretty easily. The most expensive possibility, they've already got parking rules. We're just suggesting or recommending that they be enforced. Secondly, doing something, again, they're already going to be doing the restriping on the repainting on the existing crosswalks. The issue of should additional crosswalks be added at the West End? I'm not a West Ender, so I don't know, but my remembrance from when we used to rent down at that end before we built our house was there were not the same number of very defined entrances to the beach. There were some things, as I understand it, that are all the entrances are basically on private property, but for many years, people that lived on the other side of Kings Highway or behind that were allowed to, by tradition, use those entrances. So I think there are issues that, we should look at. I agree, anything that helps to slow down what's perceived to be speeding on the West End. I'm just saying, I'm looking for the most immediate, simplest solutions to send forward right now to say, we already have X number of crosswalks. We know you're going to repaint them. How about making them a little bit more visible? That's one thing. The other thing that I thought was a very effective thing for this summer, and again, is the electronic signs, because like Carol and others have said, I often see it over at the Village Firehouse. And when I see it there, boy, I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. I think if they can purchase one for Goose Rocks that can be used elsewhere in the rest of the year, or somehow the one that's over there and used the town already owns can be deployed to Goose Rocks more frequently. Lori had a good point, is that, if you have it repeatedly, people kind of lose sensitivity to it. We've talked about, yes, getting one there and moving it around. And she may be right that even having one at all maybe we need to use it. Look at that. How often do we use it? Where do we deploy it? But again, the town already owns one. It's a matter of how they use it. And if we want to recommend buying another one, that's probably a budget item, but it's something that we could send forward very easily now. A lot of the other solutions, which I don't disagree with at all, such as the idea of striping, such as just striping this, or creating actual bicyclist pedestrian lanes. That's going to create more questions, research, whatever. So I'm trying to define this as what could we get done, hopefully ask the town to get done for this summer. And then what are other priorities that we would like to, either with the committee or asking people at the town level, wherever it's needed, to investigate further, to try and solve the problems that we're seeing. I mean, I'm just as worried as the rest of us that sooner or later, I don't want to wait till the first accident happens or the first kid gets hit on their bike by a car moving too fast.
Yeah. Kate, I think one of the striping is actually relatively easy and, not really contentious. And just based on what Tom Adler, who has experience of this, had recommended, that was his first take. If he had one thing to do, he would do that. So it just seems to me like as a sort of an easy, let's get started. It's not going to upset anybody. It's just striping down the sides of the road in orange or whatever they put on. And I would bet most people wouldn't even notice it after it's done, but it does appear to be effective. So, again, just listening to someone who's had experience in this, I think that's a good place to start. I do agree with the electronic signage. I think that definitely works, as long as we can find a good place to put it.
Well, we have a sign. I see no reason why it can't be deployed to Goose Rocks for a certain amount of time. It seems to have spent an inordinate amount of time at North Street and on Pier Road in Cape Porpoise.
It was at Goose Rocks an awful lot last year on Dyke Road. I thought it was almost permanently, it seemed.
Yeah, I don't go down that way, so I guess I didn't notice it. I saw it once or twice, but okay, so.
One other thing that we can do is, which we discussed years and years ago, and I think Mike Weston was on our board at that time, but a lot of these issues are interesting, and there are observations, and Mike pointed out before the town would do anything in a big way about any of these problems is they would need a traffic study. And so, for example, the thought of, putting a bike lane on the west end or putting a one-way from the store, or I would favor the next block, not at the store, along the busy part of Kings Highway. The town wouldn't consider doing that without a traffic study.
I think you're right,
okay.
Paul. It's really beyond our pay grade to say exactly where these crosswalks and road narrowing stripes should be, because they may have unintended consequences that we didn't think of.
Okay. I just need to hop in here in terms of procedurally going ahead. We're at almost 7:15 already.
Yeah, I'm leaving at 8, by the way.
Yeah, we haven't even had a chance to open this up to comments from the public. We can do one of two things. Either we can put this forward again to further discussion and not actually come to recommendations or motions that we send forward right now, because I think there's a lot more to discuss here. And again, as I said, I know Barry and his subcommittee are looking for input from the community too. We haven't even had a chance to do that. We have a couple of more items that we need to get through tonight, and I'd like to move ahead to those. So does anybody, either we go ahead and we voted on one motion about the no parking, enforcing the no parking rules. Can we leave that be the sole thing we send forward right now?
I'm just wondering though, if we have specific recommendations, if it's going to be too late for the town to act for this coming summer, if we leave it to the next meeting. I don't know.
If we talked about them in February, that would
what's
give
that?
us enough time. If we talked about them in February, I think that would give us enough time.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but you're clearly not ready for prime time with this. And if you bring it forward, I want to be able to help you and support this. That's my job here, is to make sure that the things that come out of this committee or any of the other committees that I'm on are ready for prime time when it comes to the Board of Selectmen. I can't promise you that they'll pass, but I want to be able to be there and be your advocate for those things.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should, Kate, I think we should wait. I'm just hearing so much feedback and good ideas all, but let's prioritize, and maybe we have a meeting in February just to go through these. Everybody's got a copy of the document, and we can sort of, put it together. And I agree with Ed. Let's get a concerted effort here where we're all on the same page. It'll come through much better. Right now, we're just throwing a lot of ideas around, and it tends to be all over the map.
Right.
Okay.
And matter of fact, I can put one more on the map because I want to be able to talk between now and February. Have you talked to the realtors about your idea of not picking up on Saturday, the trash?
It's not gonna.
I have not. And,
Yeah, I think that's something we've really got to look at.
Okay.
Yeah, my only attitude there was safety first and not any one interest. The same way the landscapers, it's I didn't speak to them on can they park. I think my view was we've got to create a safe environment, and someone's going to be, their nose is going to be out of joint. So, if
It's a matter of how practical it is, Barry. It's not whether their nose is out of joint. So we just have to see. Let's see what makes
And
it.
as far as the trash goes, off the top of my head, we're lucky we're getting our trash picked up with, the shortage in the workforce, truck
With
drivers.
every week, right.
Yeah, and I mean,
Folks, I totally agree, but let's not, we've agreed, I think I hear, that we will go forward on, even table the a motion that we had voted on the parking rules, no parking areas. And we will pick up this discussion hopefully over the next month, and we will have input from the community, and we will each be able to give it more thought and figure out what are very short-term doable solutions for this summer, what are next priorities to work on, and what are the steps that need to be taken in connection with those. So we come together with a little bit more, okay, here are the steps we think we want to recommend and that we think need to be taken. Is that what you think we need to come to, Ed?
Okay, may I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Because there's a lot here, and with this damn COVID, I find it sometimes difficult to work over Zoom. I'm more of a face-to-face kind of guy, but perhaps we just have a special meeting and discuss this and set a time limit, an hour, 2 hours, and whatever you don't get done, then you put on the following agenda. Maybe we have 2 meetings in February.
Okay.
But if this means this much to you, I think we need to you need to sit down, or we, I say you, I mean that interchangeably here, and have a very thorough discussion of this, and make it the only topic of the evening.
That makes sense.
I like that.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Well, let's talk about, I will look into whether we, how we can schedule a separate meeting in just on this topic. It obviously depends on, availability of Dave and technology, et cetera. And I'll look into that. Otherwise, we have a meeting on February 21st. Since we are proceeding as of this month with our third Monday of the month is our meeting date. Okay, but I will look and see if we can put in a second meeting in February.
Or use that February meeting for that purpose.
A February meeting solely for that. That will depend a lot on, what the other things we've got going on are. So for tonight, we are leaving this one as further discussion, further decisions as to what we want to recommend or not recommend, or how to.
There's one hand up.
Whose hand? I mean, a committee member or a person out in the community?
Person.
Okay.
Roseanne Cook.
Roseanne, I'm hoping to not. Roseanne.
Your hand's still up.
Okay.
You're muted.
Excuse me.
Sorry, can you hear me now? I think I just was able to mute myself. Sorry. Listen, first of all, I just want to thank all of you for the amazing work that you do. I just want you to know how much, we appreciate what you do. We've had a home on New Bedford Road for 60 years. And so we've invested a lot of our family memories in Goose Rocks Beach. The only thing I wanted to say right now is I noticed when Barry was going through all of the speed reduction, the mitigation efforts, that nothing was mentioned about New Bedford Road. And last year, I think we had 2, if I recall, we had 2 electronic signs on Bedford Road, reminding people what the speed limit was. And we have really felt it's made a difference to have those signs. And I think we had a couple of speed bumps too. But anyway, the last year or 2 has been so much better over there. I just want to make sure we stay on your list of, area roads that need to be monitored for speed, since we weren't mentioned. So thank you.
You weren't mentioned.
Sorry for the omission, but certainly it's, I've taken New Bedford Road often, and I agree with you. The speed bumps and the electronic work there. So it's great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Please put us back.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
All right, so let's move on quickly to the next thing I wanted to mention is we do have elections coming up this spring for the BAC. There will be 3 seats opening up this spring and will be up for election. One is my seat, actually, a backlot seat. And then there are 2 beachfront seats that will be opening up. So I want people out there to please start thinking about whether they are willing to or interested in running for election to any of those seats, depending on where your property is located. The time frame will be that in April, the town will send out information regarding running for BAC openings and ask for any people who are interested to send in the paperwork. Which will need to be in by April 15th, and then about May 1st, the town will send out the ballots. Now, I know one thing that I think numbers of people have pointed out, that properties have changed hands in the last couple of years at the beach. And some people may not even be aware of whether, and I may be preaching to the choir, to the 8 people who may be listening to tonight's session, but people may not even be aware of whether their particular property is available. It has a right to vote or run for one of the seats. And basically it comes down to whether or not your property was under whatever previous owners was a signatory to the beach use agreement, either as a backlot owner or as a beachfront owner. If you have any interest and are not sure whether you qualify to hold a seat on the Beach Advisory Committee, please feel free to send in an email to our email address, and Carol, as our secretary, or I will check to make sure now with the new numbering system, if you just look at the beach use agreement that's on file at the Registry of Deeds, you wouldn't necessarily, you'd have to have the translation from the old numbers to the new, particularly with regard to properties on Kings Highway. So if you're at all interested but not sure whether your property qualifies, please get in touch and we'll be happy to provide that information.
Kate, it's also in their deed. If anybody bought a property, you can just look at your deed and it would tell you whether your predecessor was part of the beach use agreement or not.
I'd like to think so. I'm not.
It is.
Well, okay. Most people don't look at their deeds, but that's a good point. But either way, or they can just get in touch, and please talk it up with your friends and neighbors. It's not a terrible job to hold, and it's very interesting, and it's very important for the health and future of this beach. Okay, that's all I have to say about elections. I just wanted to start raising people's consciousness about it because we do have 3 openings coming up this year. And then, let's see. I'm going to flip items 7 and 8. Let's talk under other business because we do have an issue that has, not an issue, something has come up. We have received an offer from Kennebunkport Resort Collection to sponsor a fireworks display off Goose Rocks Beach. Initially, they were suggesting July 4th this summer. So before we have any response from the committee, I want to open it. Justin, are you there still? Is Justin Grimes still available? Maybe.
He is. He has his hand up.
Good. Dave, can you do whatever magic you need to for allowing him to speak? Great.
Everyone, can you hear me?
Hi, Justin.
And
Hi there. Good evening. Did you want to say more, Kate, or did you want me to jump in?
no, I'd love you to jump in first, and then we can either comments or if there's members of the public out there that want to comment. So go for it.
Excellent. Thank you. And thanks everyone to the committee here. It's been really informative to be on the call tonight. Definitely walking out of here with a much larger brain than I walked in with. So some great topics here. And And also too, want to just, commit to, from the KRC's perspective to a lot of the goals mentioned here, from traffic to erosion to, regeneration of beach grass, to be a part of this moving forward. And I hope to be on future calls and future meetings moving forward to assist how we can. Again, Kate mentioned it, but I'm Justin Grimes. I'm the managing director of the Kennebunkport Resort Collection. My wife and I live just up the road here a bit on Abenaki Way. So also personally invested in the beach and the community here, in addition to my 11 years here with the KRC. In interest of time, obviously, I don't want to take up much more than just a handful of minutes here. But Kate mentioned, we introduced the idea of as we were looking ahead to our future plans for the season, of a possible fireworks display, not necessarily just around 4th of July, but around that time or sometime, derived during the season that would be an opportunity for the community and for our guests to celebrate the festivities, whether it be the holiday or not. I sent an email and the committee was kind enough to read it. And then Kate was kind enough to call me today, with some concerns from the board here related to crowds, obviously the beach grass issue, which again, we spoke about tonight, police, fire safety, and also protection of the endangered species on the beach. So, certainly it's not not a concept we're looking to forge forward with if there isn't, support from the committee here, obviously. And so wanted to just see if there was additional concerns or, alternative ideas as well. Kate, you had alluded to it as well, but other ways to maybe celebrate the festivities, again, whether it be 4th of July or otherwise, that don't include fireworks or, or some sort of celebration that, really just enhances Goose Rock's beach area. And again, can be, community ad for Kennebunkport, but also for our guests and, kind of balancing all interests. So with that said, I'll hand it back to you, Kate, but I appreciate everyone taking the time to at least consider this, and also happy to talk this further on the next meeting for interest of time, if that's best.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you had to, being at the very end, had to sit through all this, but at least you've certainly gotten a chance, a bird's eye view of what the Beach Advisory Committee does and all the many issues that we're dealing with here at the beach.
Absolutely, it's been great.
As we talked about this afternoon, and I suspect maybe other people in the committee will also but I don't want to go to a lot of discussion, but we do have some serious concerns about anything involving fireworks. I mean, I know fireworks are fun and all that. There's a lot of good reasons that the town has for years participated with Kennebunk in the fireworks that are that go off of Gooch's Beach, and that are visible from a major portion of, not from Goose Rocks per se, but from the farther, what does that make that, west Ocean Avenue area of downtown. And it's a very popular thing that people do around on the 4th of July. Go drive over to the Ocean Avenue area. I don't know, the St. Anne's opens their parking lot, but a lot of people enjoy the fireworks from there. We do have a very different situation at Goose Rocks. First of all, we have very limited parking. And whenever we've had an event that draws a lot of people, I mean, we already know we have parking problems and traffic and safety problems, as we've discussed tonight. Whenever we put forth an event that's going to draw many more people from other areas, for example, on the July 4th, the morning thereof, the road race that's always been run by the Goose Rocks Beach Association. I personally know that, there's a lot of people that come here strictly to run in that road race, and back up, we live back up in the area behind the community house. We have an enormous amount of cars parking back there. It is very carefully orchestrated by the Goose Rocks Beach Association people. We've been doing it for years, but it is in and out. Those people are in and out in like an hour and a half or so. It's not all morning or even all evening. So any extensive additional parking or on-street parking that otherwise would be a no-no, I personally would not like to see that extended further. Any event, I think we did talk about the fact that particularly on the July 4th area, that the public safety people here in town are already stretched really thin. It's one of the busiest times of year for this town. Even if we looked at another time in the season for something like fireworks, we'd still have, issues of inordinate additional traffic coming through, parking issues, et cetera. So I do have concerns with that. And we talked quite a bit about the fireworks being, we, unlike Gooch's, which is basically sand, concrete, and granite, no real evidence, real, vegetation that we have to worry about. Obviously, the dune grass, the few times we have had dune grass fires, it's been started, as I recall, mostly by fireworks. In this case, illegal ones being used by private individuals. But as our fire chief said when he commented on the whole issue we were looking at last year about campfires on the beach, the beach has unique properties in that the sea breezes, number one, are very variable. And even if fireworks are being shot off out over the water, it is entirely possible that the wind could change, direction could change unexpectedly, and we could have sparks being blown onto the shore, including onto the dune grass, which again, as he points out, because of the drying nature, because it's out there with sea breeze constantly blowing on it, tends to be drier vegetation, and we could have a real conflagration starting. So there's a fire and safety issue, the protection of the dune grass. And, we've talked about things like, it is basically a quiet family beach. And we'd like to keep it that way. We appreciate, your many visitors and your various resorts. But we also have the issue that of the endangered species that we have here, who have a tough enough time trying to survive all the humans that are around during the day on the beach. But at least that is prime time through most of the summer, actually, is pretty prime time for nesting, hatching, and baby birds running all over the beach. So that's another factor, again, that the beach, at least at Gooch's, does not have that issue. So overall, we like the idea. We're happy to continue discussing some other way, perhaps, that if KRC wants to do something to, some form of celebration or event or something, happy to continue talking about that. But I have to say, I, for one, would be opposed to fireworks displays at any time of the season. Anybody else?
No, I think you said it most eloquently.
So would
typing plover is the determining factor, if nothing else.
Yeah, that could be a very big fine for the town of one of those little guys.
Somebody who's having his life turned upside down over Endangered Species Act, you do not want to violate that.
Yeah. Yep. So Justin, would you like to continue? Like to continue talking with me, either with me or in the public forum like this, of some other, maybe come up with some other ideas we might think about or talk about, say for our next meeting or meeting?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and again, I appreciate you, reiterating those points. I think they're all well received, and like I said, it's not something we want to do if there's not support for it. Obviously, it would both be, not in our ability to do so, but we want to make sure that it's something that everyone would support if it's what we did. So my thought was maybe if internally, our group here thinks a little bit about some ideas, and maybe I could offline with you prior to the next meeting and talk through some other ideas. But like I said, ultimately, just really appreciate you all considering it. It's just an idea to float out there, and like I said, we certainly respect the opinion back. And I knew knew there'd be some strong feelings towards it, and understandable all the reasons why. And like I said, my goal is to be active moving forward in this group here, and it also might make sense for myself to be involved in that traffic meeting. Obviously, at KRC, we can really help move the needle, I think, as it relates to that issue, and also additional eyes on that topic. So would love to be involved in that moving forward as well.
Great, I appreciate that, and it was a good idea to bring forward, and hopefully we've contributed to education about what the beach means and what are the issues and problems there, and we can work together to see if there's something else that might for the beach and for KRC.
I like s'mores.
I do too.
I like
We have plenty of
lobster.
those.
4th of July clam bake. That would be,
There we go. That's what we used to do, right?
we used to dig holes in the sand. We won't talk about that.
I know.
No, we're not going to talk about holes
The
dug.
whole
Yeah.
day.
These days, the holes that are being dug in the sand, as my husband describes them, they look like it'd be used for foxholes on D-Day. I mean, they're that
They look
deep.
like bomb damage. Yeah, it's bomb.
Really,
damage.
really,
Yeah.
it's not the traditional little kid pail and shovel type holes. So that's another whole issue. We will discuss it.
Whole issue.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
It's getting late.
Getting late too. All right. I think then we have we're already after 8, and I think public comments on matters not on the agenda. I would like to postpone that until, again, we look as having at least 1 and possibly 2 issues. If somebody does have a public comment or an issue they want to bring up, please. I don't mean to cut people short tonight, but I think we really need to move on for tonight. And let's just say, feel free to email us. It will be distributed out to the members of the committee. You'll get, your point across, and we can hopefully get back to you. But otherwise, I'd like to move forward to a motion to adjourn. Our next meeting will be February 21st or sooner, sometime in February, if we can arrange a second meeting, have a 2-meeting month so that we talk about more extensively about the traffic and safety issues.
Carol has a comment.
Quickly, I had 2 things I wanted John to talk about how we're doing for recycling, if Goose Rock's Beach is being good stewards, and are we participating well in your recycling program?
The recycling has gone extremely well. Goose Rocks, our summer, we cleared the entire summer without incurring any contamination.
Perfect.
So I think we had some early issues with plastic bags. We put up the sign that that electric sign coming in Dyke Road, and it really seemed to work.
Yes,
So
it
it's
did.
another point to those electric signs being useful. So kudos to everyone. We've got to stay vigilant, but things are going well.
Very good. And number 2, for the past couple of years, we have asked the Board of Selectmen to approve $3,000 to have a piping plover volunteer coordinator. We have not had a piping plover coordinator step up, and I have been, I haven't filled that role, but I tried to do my best. But we've now lost Barbara Bauerwise, who has moved, and Barbara Renkwell. And we need a volunteer coordinator, and I'd like to ask the town again if they would give us $3,000, and I will try to find again a piping plover volunteer, because as Ed said, we do not want to violate the Endangered Species Act. We do not. He's absolutely correct, and I'm so glad you're there to tell people, Ed, because they don't pay any attention to me, but you are
Well, at least,
so
hey,
right.
I'll get off my soapbox real quick, but at least at Goose Rocks Beach, there are piping plovers. To say that Maine lobstermen are killing right whales is like saying that we're all going to fly to Jupiter next week.
Yeah, I know it. It's the truth. It's the truth.
In terms of timing now, do we need to have a motion tonight to go forward, or?
It would be the best. Give me
Okay.
as much time as possible.
And I would move that that the committee requests from the town that we set aside $3,000 to pay for it. I guess it's a paid volunteer, huh? But to be able to hire an
Volunteer
individual.
coordinator.
Oh, the coordinator, thank you. To pay for a volunteer coordinator so that we can get volunteers to
Yes.
protect our pipers and maintain our good record with the state.
Yeah.
I would just add that should come out of the Beach Advisory Fund.
Yes,
Indeed, I think that would be so, yeah.
please.
Okay, so the motion is that we recommend to the Board of Selectmen that the town set aside up to $3,000 to pay for a piping plover volunteer coordinator
Yes, perfect.
for this upcoming season.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Yeah, second it. But
Okay, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, John,
Aye.
Ed, Carol,
Aye.
Paul,
Yes.
Joanne,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
Barry. Barry.
He said aye.
He said
Oh,
aye.
thank you.
Give me the thumb.
And I vote aye. So
Aye,
that's
aye,
unanimous,
sorry.
Unless I've forgotten somebody.
Ay, ay, ay.
Unanimous. Okay, we did one motion out of tonight that will go forward. Thank you very much. Thanks for reminding me about that, Carol.
No
All
problem.
right, folks, is anybody interested in adjourning?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, I have a motion to adjourn.
I motion.
Okay,
I second.
thank you. Joanne,
Oh, definitely.
Jen,
Yes.
John,
Absolutely.
Carol,
Aye.
Paul,
Yes.
Ed, if you're still here.
I'm still here, but I can smell dinner.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
If it's a lobster, I'll be right over. Who else did I forget? Paul, Barry, who?
I think we're all here.
Aye.
Okay, then
Well done, guys.
I do. Thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.
Good
everyone.
night, everybody.
Yeah.
Nice to see you,
Take
Jen.
care.
God bless
Stay
all.
warm.
Stay